hey, I've fallen off one of these before. So and I know there's some doctors here, so I'm going to be okay from O&M, so it'll be all right. Excited to have you here. We're going to have a panel after this, and then I think we break for lunch. So I'm going to up the energy. Excited to be here and talk about the disruptive potential of generative AI in emerging markets, or for emerging markets. If I was on Zoom, I would have you use the polling buttons. So I'm going to start with a very simple question. Who here can raise their hand? Good, okay, so I know your hands work, that's very good. I'm gonna have some questions throughout this talk where we're gonna try to predict whether generative AI can solve a certain problem or not. We've heard a lot about generative AI, a lot about the power of these new technologies, but as a business school professor, unlike Armando, I'm not inventing that future. I'm trying to work out how we can translate it to benefit businesses, particularly businesses in emerging markets. And so I want to start real simple, because when we think of generative AI, it's computers programming themselves, it's robots taking over, it's all this stuff that's wild and super sci-fi. But I want to take us back a little bit to the present, so let me jump in and just say, I want to understand if AI text, I'm not going to do multimodal AI, I'm going to set aside the photos, I love the images from AI, but we're going to focus on the text part. Does it have disruptive potential? Can it change the way business works? Right? And the reason I think that's worth asking is, how many of you have been to this website? I know your hands work. How many of you have been to this website? So if you haven't, you should go to chat.openai.com and play around with ChatGPT, with this generative AI. When we're talking about generative AI and this whole thing that has taken over the discourse and the conversation, it's a text box on a website. Right, we have all these amazing panelists. MIT Tech Review publishes a whole bunch on generative AI, and what we're freaking out about is a text box on a website. It's just words, right? That's all it's doing. It says, how can I help you today? And it says, oh, right, help me write a thank you note, or help me do something else. And yet we're all here to try to understand this technology, and I think it's worth taking the skeptic's case of, do I really think something that's basically sending back a text message, or what you'd read in a PDF, can that really transform the economy? Right, let's sort of put our skeptical hat on, and I think there are reasons that it might not. I think, however, on balance, right, there is phenomenal potential in this technology. I'm going to show you examples of that. And I think there's particularly phenomenal potential, this disruptive potential of AI, for emerging markets. Places like the Dominican Republic. I'm going to show you work from Kenya that I've done. Places like India. I think this technology can fundamentally change the way labor markets work, technology works. And I think Chris set us up really nice earlier when he was talking about trust. I think it's pretty amazing that these are the places that seem to trust AI the most. Right? And we'll walk through a little bit about why that is. And so let me start with the first use case. First use case for why I think generative AI can be so disruptive. And it's simple, and I hope next time we're all back in the Dominican Republic doing this conference, we'll have automatic translation of everything. I put this into OpenAI last night. I think it's pretty decent. I speak zero Spanish. So, it looks pretty good to me. In the process learned it's IA, not AI, which I thought was very nice. Right? So we could translate now for every slide that you've seen in this conference in, if we had 10 minutes beforehand, we could take all those slides, feed them into OpenAI, and have a good enough, at least text translation. Speech to text, right? What's happening with translation and the wonderful people in the booth over there, I think that's years away still. But at least on the text side, we can translate. That's huge. That opens up markets to people who wouldn't have had the ability to sell in a Spanish-speaking market. It allows you to learn from people all over the world. There's some excellent work by a couple of my colleagues showing that on eBay, the introduction of automated translation allowed people in the Dominican Republic to better sell to the United States, or people in Mexico to better sell to folks in Nigeria, right? Because when we can speak the same language, that allows for economic transactions. But beyond that sort of example of translation, does it matter for the sort of day-to-day reality in emerging markets? And I have 3 photos here from work that I'm doing. One from Togo, you see merchants there on the edge. In the middle, you're seeing high-tech startups in India. And then all the way on the left there, you're seeing farmers in northern Nigeria, right? How is generative AI going to change their reality, change what they do, right? The thing that I want you to notice is those farmers are looking at a cell phone. Right? Those tech workers in India, they've got cell phones too. In Togo, I bet you if we zoomed in on that image, someone's checking WhatsApp, right? Positive of it, right? In the same way, I'm sure, with 100% probability, someone is looking at WhatsApp on their phone right now. I won't make you raise your hand, it's okay. It's okay, you just keep chatting away. And I think this fact that phones exist, that WhatsApp exists, that communication channels exist, that text can move over, fundamentally changes the scalability and the impact of what generative AI can do, particularly for businesses in emerging markets. Right, that's the thesis I want to leave with you today. I'm going to talk a little bit how you might apply it to your businesses and the importance of experimenting with these tools, and to sort of really illustrate the importance of experimentation with Gen AI. Those who did not raise their hand, right, don't go to lunch. What I want you to do is take out your phone and go to chat.openai.com. I want you to just ask it questions. I want you to experience it viscerally yourself, because it's phenomenal when you do, and I think you'll find uses that I haven't and others haven't even imagined that could help you in your business and your life. But let me walk you through an experiment I did. What I'm going to do is walk you through an experiment where we leverage that fact that almost everybody, or billions of people in the world, have access to phones, have access to WhatsApp. We built a business mentor, a consultant, right? Think of it as a mini McKinsey consultant, right? A mini HBS alum, right? Who could, over WhatsApp, right, talk to Kenyan small and medium business entrepreneurs. So think someone who owns a car wash, someone who owns a restaurant, someone who owns a small hotel, right? These are folks who I and my research have shown have a hard time getting the business advice and training. They don't have the time, let alone the funds to come to Harvard Business School, right? They don't have the network of advisors that I think many of the people in this room would have. So we built an AI version, right, of these advisors that they could access over WhatsApp for free. And by built, that sounds fancy, right? It sounds like we did, years of programming and built out all these complicated APIs. Not at all. Here's what we built. That's it. It's a prompt, right? So you hear about prompt engineering. This prompt took us 3 months to build. Let me be very clear. We did a lot of user testing in the field with entrepreneurs in Kenya. It says, as an expert business mentor, your specialization is guiding Kenyan entrepreneurs with limited resources. Your mission is to improve business performance. It gives a very structured way of how it should respond. It says, communicate in the language of inquiry. So if someone responded not in English, it would respond back in their language. Use simple, non-technical English. Bold key advice and message topics. I'm going to switch over to the translation I did in 2 seconds using OpenAI. So if you're more comfortable with the Spanish, this is the prompt. It seems simple, right? I'm trained as a mathematician and a statistician. I work in economics and sociology. What's crazy to me is the way we program these things is by being a writer, right? We spent 3-4 months developing this out and getting the prompt right. And if you change these words, you can get very different responses. And so now the question is, when we tell the AI to behave like my students at Harvard Business School as sort of a business advisor, is it any good at it, right? Does it pass the sniff test, right? Does it look like something that would actually be useful for one of these entrepreneurs, these small business owners in Kenya? And so to do that, what I want to do is show you some examples of the questions that they asked. So these are 3 questions from real Kenyan entrepreneurs who participated in our study. First question. Can you calculate for me an estimate budget for 4 Friesian dairy cows and half piece of land and possible risks that I might encounter? Now, you're going to need to know the currency in Kenya. How many of you know the currency in Kenya? Oh, I see very, very few hands. I know they work. I won't cold call you. I won't ask you to tell me. But Kenyan shilling, you need to know what that value is. You need to know something about raising cows and farming, which I know absolutely nothing about, right? That's a hard question. Second, another entrepreneur asks, I have a fast food joint that I run adjacent to a matatu. It's like a bus terminus. A bus terminus. There are several such food joints at that particular place, and it's fair to say competition is stiff. How can I overcome the competitive business environment and be ahead of the rest of the pack? What a great question, right? And I think we can start thinking about how we might be able to answer that. Finally, hello, I'm a small business owner. I wash cars and motorbikes. I do this alone, but I find it tiresome. I wanted to employ 2 people to help, but I fear maybe I might start experiencing losses. How can I monitor my staff and make sure that I get maximum profit from my business? These are great questions that these businesses are struggling with. And the question is, can the AI respond? And so my rule of thumb for AI is right? Show, don't tell. I'm going to show you the actual responses that came through WhatsApp to these business owners. In the case of the first one, it does a fantastic job. We asked some Kenyan farmers if this was right. About 10%, the estimates are too high. It says it's going to be about 800,000 Kenyan shillings overall. It's probably a little bit lower. If you bargain, you probably do a little bit better. So it knows those numbers, which was amazing. It talks about not just the cost of the cow, the feeding costs, veterinary care, land prep and maintenance. In terms of risk, it brings up things like feed price fluctuations that you might forget. If you're starting a farm, the cost of feeding those cows is incredibly important. In terms of a primer for if you're thinking about cows, I'm not sure you can get much better than this, right? And I will tell you this is better than 100%, maybe with the exception of like 1 or 2 Kenyan MBAs at Harvard Business School, than the advice you would get from a Harvard Business School MBA. And it's free, I'd just like to point out, yeah. So in terms of potential and helping small businesses around the world, absolutely phenomenal. For the fast food joint that was struggling with competition, the answer is beautiful. Starts with differentiate your menu. What could you offer that's different from others? I teach this in strategy courses at Harvard Business School. This answer, 90th percentile. You get an A at Harvard Business School if this was your strategy exam. It talks not just about how to change the menu, but maybe improving customer service, adding a loyalty program, being involved in the community, cleanliness and hygiene, right? The entrepreneur who is using this could then go deeper. So if they hit the number 2 or the number 3, for example, and said, I want to introduce a loyalty program, the AI would then have a conversation with them and say, great, let's delve into how you can implement a loyalty program in your fast food joint, and then gives them a number of different opportunities on how they might implement that. Right, so it's not like you're asking one question. This person becomes someone you have a conversation with. So much so, on December 31st, 2023, right, we moved to the new year, January 1st, 2024, and about a dozen of the entrepreneurs in our study wished their AI mentor Happy New Year. They treat it as, it's been great working with you, I'm looking forward to 2024, hopefully we'll continue improving the profits of my business. Finally, on the small business owner, right, fantastic on how to hire. Create a clear job description, implement a performance measurement system, train, incentivize your employees, right? All the things that we would expect if we picked up a sort of a copy of HBR, but then as you go deeper, it's tailored to the Kenyan context, right? So you'll see it adjust itself for the sorts of businesses that operate in Nairobi and more rural areas in Kenya. And so what we did is we built this. We spent 3 months writing this prompt, writing a couple of paragraphs, and then we ran the minimum viable AI experiment. If you're a startup person, you're familiar with this idea of the minimum viable product. What you want to do is build something and see if it works. I'm going to encourage you all to build things with AI and see if they work. So we built this minimum viable AI experiment. We started in early June. By the end of October of 2023, we had run our experiment. We recruited nearly 640 small business entrepreneurs in Kenya. Half got access to the AI tool I just showed you. The other half got access to a PDF, a 100-page PDF on how to run your business. And I have been teaching for long enough that I know that if you give students a 100-page PDF, no one will read it. Right, none. Right? So that's our control group. That's the placebo we give them. And then we look at the differences between them. And we're going to look at differences in revenues and profits. And here's what we find. So if we look at the full sample, all 640 entrepreneurs, and we compare the half that got this generative AI tool to the half that didn't, what we find is very little, actually. Like, despite those answers looking so good, what we find is like maybe there's a slight improvement of their performance of profits and revenues by 5%. But it's not different than zero. There's nothing, we're sitting there being like, what happened, right? The advice looks so good. Is all this AI stuff overblown? Is it just all hype? However, when we dig into the data, what we see is 2 very different realities. If you were someone who was struggling in your business before the experiment, so you weren't, your profits were low, your revenue wasn't good, you were facing stiff competition, what we find is that you actually get worse. Working with the AI drops your revenues and profits by about 10%. There's something about this advice that's making you take the wrong actions. Conversely, for high performers, those who are doing well, you get about 15 to 20% better, right? Your revenues and profits go up. And we're like, what is going on? This is crazy. So we started digging in to the questions that the entrepreneurs asked. And what we find, if I sort of simplify this, right, is that though both people are asking, using the AI to ask for advice, the impact is different. What we think is happening is that it's because fundamentally they're addressing different sorts of problems. The low performers are asking things like, my shop is near bankruptcy, what can I do? And if you've used generative AI, if you use ChatGPT, you know it has a sunny disposition. It's always like, oh, it's so great to hear about your bankruptcy. We're gonna get through this together, right? Why don't you try marketing your business? And they say, well, I tried improving the marketing, but my customers tell me my food is terrible. And it's like, oh, that's all right, just try harder. And so I think there's a certain set of problems in the world for these entrepreneurs where the AI just can't help them, and it wants to be helpful. It's trained to be helpful. And so the entrepreneur follows this advice, follows these entrepreneurs, or the entrepreneurs follow this advice and end up being led the wrong way, right? And so one way I like to think about AI is it's like putting your foot on the gas in the car. If your car is pointed in the wrong direction, you're gonna crash, right? AI is similar. It's accelerating decision making, and if you are already pointed in the wrong direction, you're not gonna end in a good place. Conversely, the high performers, they focus on problems of growth. So it's I operate a hardware store in my town, and I've been thinking about how to expand the hardware store to a neighboring town. What should I consider? It gives phenomenal strategic advice, expanding product scope, helping you run better marketing campaigns, much, much better. And so the end result is that really what this comes down to, the value of generative AI in a business context is, can it solve your problem in hand? And for different problems, it's gonna have incredibly different results. Right? And so problems are the problem when it comes to AI, or I can translate this one into Spanish pretty easy. Los problemas son el problema, right? Like that's the issue we're running into. And the huge issue, the one that I wish I had a better answer for you, is we don't know what problems AI can solve yet. We're still in the early days, right? And so I'm gonna show you some examples of when AI may or may not help. So here's one. This is an Indian e-commerce company, Myntra. Their customers were struggling to find new clothes. They added an AI thing that helped them improve their search query. And so the question I want to know is, if I add AI into the search query, does performance decrease? Raise your hand if you think it made it worse, or does performance get better? So everyone's just stunned by AI. Who thinks performance get better? If I roll out AI sort of search assistant, you think it's gonna get better? Better, I've got 2, better. Anyone think it's gonna get worse, or we're all on the bad? Okay, we've got a couple of worse, so, right, even in the room, our priors are kind of mixed. What they find when they roll this out, which is just unbelievable to me, I was talking to the team over there, 300% more completed transactions. Huge positive effects, 300%. You launch something in your business, you see 300%, you are very, very happy. Right? Next one. This is a task that was done at BCG. So BCG has data they need to analyze. They need help writing a consulting memo. And they're going to generate a memo that will sort of give a strategic recommendation, and then they have other BCG consultants rate how good it is. Right? And so the task, is saying, basically they're describing a case study. There's a CEO of a company running a shoe company, Kleddings, and you have to analyze some data like a consultant would to work out what to do next. And they give them the AI assistance. Who thinks this is gonna help the consultants do their job better? Yes? Better? Maybe? We're seeing some. Anyone like, now this is gonna make the consultants go completely in the wrong direction? No. Okay, so everyone here, I got positive, because no one raised their hands. Unfortunately for you, right, it made their strategic recommendations 20% worse. And what's even more amazing, if you ask the consultants, they say, the ones who made these 20% worse recommendations, they are more confident in the results, and they want to use AI more, despite it making them 20% worse, right? What's even more exciting about this paper by a team of my colleagues is that if you go to the same task and you switch it from analyzing data to basically coming up with an innovation strategy. So you're still using generative AI to help you develop out a sort of a strategy consulting memo. If you switch from the task of data analysis to sort of brainstorming innovative ideas, what you find is that the AI makes you 40% better. So similar to our study, where you apply these problems fundamentally shapes the returns. And these are big returns. If you are running a small hotel and you can improve your revenues by 15% in Kenya, that can be a life-changing amount of money, right? Similarly, if BCG can make its strategic recommendations 40% better, not to mention it takes you half the time to do these, that's a game changer in terms of their productivity. Similarly, this last one, interesting work in call centers where you've seen a lot of generative AI. So you're a manager in the Philippines, you need to train your call center workers. Basically, you're gonna give the call centers an AI for ideas for how to respond when a customer comes in being angry. And I'm just gonna give this one away. You find huge increases in worker productivity, 50%. 50% increases. And so just to summarize, I've shown you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right, different places where AI is being applied, right? 2/3 of the time seems quite positive, anywhere from 15% increase in profits and revenues all the way to that 300% increase in completed transactions. Yet in 2 cases, we get significant and negative effects. Right, and from the hands in the room and from talking to experts in the field, we're starting to understand where this works, but there's still a huge amount of uncertainty in sort of where generative AI can create value. And so what does that mean? Right, if Gen AI can be applied to millions of problems, when does it help? I'm gonna give you a very simple answer, which is that we don't know what you need to do. What I'm gonna ask you to do, right, when you are in your car and you're playing on ChatGPT, is think about experimenting with this tool. You don't need to be a coder. You can write in plain text. You can write in Spanish. You can write in English. You can write in other languages too. But play with the tool, because unless you are experimenting, someone is either gonna disrupt your business because they're gonna get there first, or you potentially are gonna roll out something that can undermine, right, the efficacy of your workers, right? And so I'm just gonna give you 3 examples of experiments that are being run in emerging markets to sort of stoke your imagination, and then we'll turn it over to a discussion. So one, this company, Turn.io, really interesting company. They are building chatbots over WhatsApp, but they're not just building one. They're supporting organizations around the world to build chatbots for impact. Everything from how do you advise mothers who are about to give birth, right? So what are the best practices? They've got questions about how they're feeling, stuff around financial inclusion, education. They've basically built an accelerator because they don't know where this is gonna work. They wanna basically launch 100 companies and see where these chatbots can have a positive impact in emerging markets. Next, I was just in India, wonderful company called Sarvam AI. They're building multilingual AI, so basically allowing the 22 vernacular languages in India to benefit from AI. Again, they don't know what it's going to be used for. They're going to open up a series of APIs and then let others experiment with where this tool can create value, right? And I think that experimentation approach is really important to their business model. And then finally, this is Mino Health. This is based in West Africa. They're building foundation models for medical diagnostics. They're doing one for radiology that you can see right here. And a big part of what they're doing is partner with organizations to evaluate the effectiveness of what they're building. Right, I was just chatting at the World Bank with some folks who are evaluating the effectiveness of these tools, right? And one of the things you see is that what looks good in theory doesn't look good in practice. Doctors say they want to use these tools, you give it to them, they completely ignore it. Or they use it inappropriately, or they use it in a way that actually harms the patient experience. And so they're very much focused on rolling out and seeing how it might allow doctors who, in some of these places, there's 1 doctor per 60,000 people, right? Better, right, expand their scope to reach them. So, just to end, the uneven impact of Gen AI, for some problems, AI dramatically decreases performance. For others, it dramatically improves performance. I just want to pause here. I think for a lot of other technologies, that unevenness is much smaller, right? If you think about the rollout of electricity, right? It helps us see in the dark better, but it can't be applied to the millions of sorts of problems that generative AI can. And its benefits, I think, are much more clear, right? You can see in the dark, it's phenomenal. Here, it's much harder to know when these tools are gonna work. Second, the global scale of Gen AI fundamentally changes things. Through WhatsApp, and you can connect through Turn.io, ChatGPT to WhatsApp in about 10 minutes. Billions suddenly have access to AI advice, mentorship, coaching, and more. I think it's just phenomenal and a point of optimism. 3, what that means is that if there's uneven impacts and people can scale to billions of people relatively cheaply, you need to be experimenting with these tools. If you are not doing it, someone else is gonna come in and come up with a great AI advisor or a great AI financial advisor. And you're gonna look 2 years from now back and say, oh my gosh, I run a fintech company. I completely missed out, and now everyone's using these AI tools because they rapidly experimented and then scaled incredibly quickly, because all you need is a phone, right, to access these sorts of tools. And so with that, I will leave you with this. I want you to go experiment with AI. I want you to try things, and then I want you to tell me about them so that we can all learn together what works and how we can really make AI work for emerging markets in particular. Thank you very much, everybody.